I took out a loan to help my family in a time of need, but when the time came to pay me back, they turned their backs on me. It was supposed to be a temporary solution, just a quick fix for a family in need. When my brother lost his job, the pressure was on us to help him get back on his feet. He promised that he would pay me back as soon as he could, but I knew that promises, especially in moments of desperation, were often just words. Still, I didn't hesitate. I took out the loan, trusting that family meant something more than just blood. The moment the money hit my bank account, I felt both a sense of relief and a gnawing worry. Relief because I knew my brother could get back on his feet. Worry because I had no idea how I would manage this huge debt on my own. Weeks turned into months. My brother started to pick up the pieces of his life. Slowly, he found another job, but it wasn't enough. The pay was low and the hours long. Still, he assured me he would pay back the loan as soon as he could, though each time I asked, he gave me a vague answer. Life kept moving forward, and I convinced myself that things would eventually fall into place. But deep down, I could feel the weight of the debt pressing against me, suffocating me little by little. What was supposed to be a small sacrifice for my family was beginning to feel like a mountain I had to climb alone. I stopped asking. Maybe I was afraid of the confrontation, or maybe I thought it was better to let it slide. But every time I saw my brother out, enjoying life, going on small trips or buying new things, the sting of betrayal hit me harder. How could he live like this while I was buried under the weight of the loan? It wasn't just the money, it was the principle. The trust I had in my family was starting to erode. They didn't even seem to notice my struggle, or maybe they did and simply didn't care. Every time I saw a new expense in his life, a part of me died inside. I started noticing the changes. The conversations with my family became more strained. They would ask me how things were going, but there was an underlying tension in the air. It wasn't just about the loan anymore. It was about the quiet resentment that had started to grow between us. I was drowning in bills, struggling to make ends meet, while my brother's life seemed to be on an upward trajectory. I began avoiding family gatherings. The thought of seeing him, knowing what he owed me, made my stomach turn. I felt betrayed, isolated in a situation I couldn't fix. Then came the call that would change everything. My brother reached out, finally, but it wasn't to repay me. He had a new emergency, one that required money, and once again he turned to me for help. It was like a slap to the face. How could he think I would help him again after everything that had happened? The debt wasn't just about the money anymore. It was about the principle, the broken trust. But the guilt set in. Was I really going to refuse to help him when he was in trouble? The thought of saying no weighed heavily on me, but so did the realization that I had already given him everything I could. I said no. It wasn't easy. In fact, it was one of the hardest things I've ever done. For the first time in months, I stood my ground, despite the guilt that gnawed at me. My brother's reaction was what I expected. Anger and disappointment. But it didn't stop there. The phone calls stopped coming. The family gatherings became even more awkward. My brother avoided me, and soon so did everyone else. They all sided with him, convinced that I was being unreasonable, but I was done being the one to sacrifice. I was done being the one left behind. Days turned into weeks, and the silence grew. My family tried to pressure me into forgiving him, saying it was just a small mistake. But I couldn't forget how it felt to be ignored and left holding the bag. I had made a huge sacrifice, and yet no one seemed to care. The loan, the trust, and the promises had all been broken. I was left with nothing but the heavy weight of debt and a bitter sense of betrayal. My family had chosen sides, and I was the one who had lost. I had to face the truth. The truth wasn't just that my brother had taken advantage of my kindness, it was that I had allowed it to happen. I had let my family take from me without ever considering the toll it would take on me. I had allowed myself to become the scapegoat, the one who gave and gave without ever receiving anything in return. But now, I was done. I couldn't keep living like this. I had to put myself first, even if that meant severing ties with the people I had always trusted. I started to rebuild. Slowly, painfully, I began to rebuild my life piece by piece. I sought out financial advice, learned how to budget properly, and even started to regain some of the money I had lost in the loan. But the emotional healing took much longer. It wasn't just about the money anymore. It was about learning how to trust again, learning how to say no, and learning how to take care of myself first. I wasn't the same person anymore. I was stronger, more cautious, but also more aware of what I deserved. Looking back, I realized that sometimes we have to go through the worst situations to learn the most important lessons. I learned that family doesn't always mean support, and that trust isn't something that should be given lightly. I also learned that taking care of yourself isn't selfish, it's necessary. My relationship with my brother may never be the same, but I'm no longer that person who sacrifices everything for others. I am someone who values my worth, and that's something no one can take away. The moment I saw him again, it hit me harder than I expected. My brother, standing there in front of me, asking for help yet again. I had spent months avoiding him, dreading this moment, but here we were, face to face. The emotions that surged through me were overwhelming. Anger, betrayal, but also a strange sense of sadness. I could see it in his eyes. He didn't understand the depth of what he had done, or maybe he didn't care. His words were pleading, almost desperate, but all I could think about was everything I had already sacrificed for him. The loan, the trust, the promises he had broken. I had given him everything I could, and yet here he was asking for more. His voice shook as he spoke, and for a brief moment I almost gave in. I could hear the panic in his tone, the fear that things were falling apart for him again. But that fear only made me feel more resolute. This wasn't just about money anymore. This was about me, about finally taking a stand for myself. I couldn't keep being the one who was always there, the one who always fixed things for him. I was tired of being the crutch, the backup plan, the one who would always be there when things went wrong. The truth was, I had allowed this. I had allowed myself to be used, to be taken advantage of, and now I was paying the price. The silence between us was deafening. His eyes darted around, searching for any sign of forgiveness, but I couldn't give it to him. Not this time. His words faltered, and I saw the realization in his eyes. He had thought I would cave. He had always been able to get what he wanted from me before, and he couldn't understand why I was standing firm now. "I need you," he said, almost in a whisper, but it was too late. He didn't realize that what he needed wasn't money. It was something more important: respect, trust, and accountability. I could feel the anger rising in me, but I held it in check. This wasn't about shouting or fighting. It was about asserting my boundaries, something I had never done before. I looked him in the eye, my voice steady but firm. "I can't help you anymore," I said. "I've given everything I could, and I'm done." The words felt heavy as they left my mouth, but they were the right words. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I was taking control of my life. I was finally standing up for myself, and it felt both terrifying and liberating at the same time. His face twisted with confusion and anger. "You're just going to turn your back on me?" he demanded. "After everything I've been through, you're going to leave me like this?" The guilt gnawed at me, but I fought it back. It wasn't that I was leaving him. I was finally choosing not to enable his behavior anymore. I wasn't walking away from him. I was walking away from the cycle of resentment and disappointment that had taken hold of our relationship. The conversation spiraled into a heated argument. He accused me of being selfish, of not caring, of abandoning him in his time of need, and maybe in his eyes that was true, but I knew deep down that this was the only way I could protect myself. Every day I had spent trying to fix things for him had chipped away at my own sense of self-worth. I had to stop. For my own mental and emotional well-being, I had to say no, and that no was stronger than any guilt or regret I felt. As the argument continued, I could see the walls going up between us. He wasn't listening, and I realized that he probably never would. This wasn't about the money. It was about the pattern that had been established between us, the one where I always gave and he always took. It was a dynamic that had become toxic, and I couldn't be a part of it anymore. I was letting go of the person I thought I had to be for him and embracing the person I needed to be for myself. For a moment, there was silence, the kind of silence that settles in after a storm, the kind that leaves everything feeling still and uncertain. He stood there staring at me, his anger and frustration still hanging in the air, but there was something else in his eyes now, something like understanding. He didn't like it, but he could see that I wasn't going to change my mind. And for the first time, I felt a sense of peace. It wasn't the peace of a perfect resolution, but the peace of knowing I had made the right choice for myself. We both walked away that day, but not in the same way. I left with a sense of closure, with the weight of my decisions settling over me like a heavy blanket. He left with his anger, his pride, and his hurt feelings. I didn't know what would happen next, but I knew that I had finally chosen my own path. I had taken control of my life, and in that moment that was enough. It wasn't easy, it wasn't pretty, but it was real, and sometimes that's the hardest thing to face. The truth that you can't always save the people you love. The truth that sometimes you have to let go in order to save yourself. And as I walked away from that moment, I knew one thing for sure. I would never allow myself to be in that position again. No more broken promises, no more empty sacrifices. I was done. The weeks that followed were strange, almost surreal. I felt like a weight had been lifted from my shoulders, yet there was a lingering emptiness in my chest. It wasn't that I was happy with what had happened, far from it, but I realized that something had changed in me. I had made the decision to stand up for myself, and no matter how hard it was the right choice. For the first time in a long while, I felt like I was in control of my own life. I no longer had to live in the shadows of other people's mistakes and expectations. The emotional toll wasn't easy to shake off. I had been carrying the burden of guilt for so long, feeling responsible for everyone else's happiness, but now I was forced to confront the truth. No one else could fix their problems except for them. I could could offer support, but I could no longer carry their burdens for them. And that realization, while painful, was liberating. It was a lesson in self-care, in setting boundaries, and in recognizing that my own well-being mattered just as much as anyone else's. I started spending more time doing things for myself, things I had long put aside in the name of family and responsibility. I went for long walks, started reading again, and even took up a new hobby I had always wanted to try. It wasn't much, but it was a start. It was a way of reclaiming the pieces of myself that I had lost in the process of trying to please everyone else. Slowly, I began to feel more like myself again, and the heaviness of the past seemed to lift, if only a little. It wasn't just about the time I spent on myself, though. It was about the mental shift I had made. I realized that my worth wasn't tied to what I could give to others. I had spent so many years thinking that my value came from being the dependable one, the one who could fix problems, that I had neglected the fact that I deserved love, respect, and support too. And slowly, I started to rebuild my sense of self-worth, brick by brick. It wasn't an easy process, but I was finally learning to appreciate who I was, not for what I could do for others, but for who I was as a person. In the midst of this personal transformation, I received a message from my brother. It wasn't a long message, but it was enough to make my heart skip a beat. He apologized. For the first time, he acknowledged the hurt he had caused and expressed regret for taking advantage of me. It wasn't an apology that fixed everything, but it was a start. For the first time, I felt like he understood the impact of his actions on me, and that realization gave me some peace. I didn't expect things to go back to normal overnight, but this was a step in the right direction. The apology, however, didn't change everything immediately. Trust is something that takes time to rebuild, and the road ahead would be difficult. I knew that my relationship with my brother would never be the same, but there was a quiet hope that started to blossom in me. Maybe, just maybe, we could start over, not from where we left off, but from a place of understanding and respect. I wasn't sure what the future held, but for the first time in a long while, I felt hopeful that things could improve. I also realized that forgiveness wasn't just for him, it was for me too. Forgiveness wasn't about letting him off the hook or excusing his behavior. It was about freeing myself from the chains of anger, resentment, and bitterness that had been weighing me down. Letting go of that negativity didn't mean forgetting or excusing, but it meant taking back control of my own peace of mind. It was a choice I had to make for myself, even if it took time to fully heal. I began to have more honest conversations with my family. It wasn't easy, and sometimes it felt like I was walking on eggshells, but I knew that it was necessary. I couldn't keep pretending that everything was fine when it wasn't. The more I spoke up for myself, the more I realized how many unspoken truths had been lingering in our family for years. We had all been holding on to resentment, fear, and guilt, but by finally opening up, we began to make small steps toward healing. As I looked back on everything that had happened, I understood one thing clearly. I couldn't keep living in the past. I couldn't keep holding on to the pain and disappointment. It was time to move forward. Not just for my brother, not just for my family, but for me. I was ready to take the lessons from this experience and apply them to my future. I had learned that boundaries were not just important, they were essential. I had learned that my needs mattered, and most importantly, I had learned that sometimes letting go was the only way to move forward. The transformation wasn't immediate. It wasn't a sudden shift from pain to happiness, but it was real. Slowly, I started to regain my confidence. I started to trust myself again. I started to trust that I was capable of making decisions that were in my best interest, even if it meant disappointing others. The road ahead wasn't clear, but I knew that whatever came next, I would face it with strength and clarity. When I think back to everything that happened, I realize that life has a way of teaching us lessons in the most unexpected ways. What started as an act of kindness and love turned into one of the hardest challenges I've ever faced. But it was through that challenge that I discovered my own strength. I realized that I had been giving away too much of myself, and that no one, not even family, has the right to take advantage of my heart. That realization was painful, but also powerful, because it gave me the freedom to finally see my own worth. There were nights when I couldn't sleep, when the debt weighed heavily on my chest and the thought of betrayal consumed my mind. But in those dark hours, I found clarity. I realized that no matter how much I gave, no one else could truly save me. I had to be the one to stand up for myself, to draw the line, to say enough is enough. That moment when I said no was more than a refusal. It was a declaration of self-respect. It was me finally telling the world and myself that I mattered. The journey wasn't perfect. There were setbacks. There were moments of guilt where I questioned my decision. Family is complicated, and it's never easy to distance yourself from the people you love. But I had to remind myself of the truth. Love without respect is not love at all. Trust without without accountability is an illusion, and forgiveness without boundaries is just another form of self-destruction. I couldn't keep sacrificing my well-being for the sake of keeping peace in a family that wasn't willing to see my pain. There were times when I wondered if things would ever go back to the way they were before. The truth is, they won't, and that's okay. Sometimes the hardest part of growth is accepting that some relationships will never be the same again. They change because we change, and that change isn't always a loss. It can be a transformation. It can be the beginning of a healthier, more balanced dynamic, or sometimes it's the end of a cycle that was never healthy to begin with. As I moved forward, I found strength in the small victories. Paying off part of the loan felt like a weight being chipped away one piece at a time. Learning to budget, to plan, to manage my own financial life gave me confidence I never had before. It wasn't just about recovering from the money I had lost. It was about building a future where I would never find myself in the same position again. That sense of control was worth more than any dollar amount. My relationship with my brother remains complicated. There are days when we talk and days when we don't, but I no longer feel the need to force a connection. I let it be what it is, without expectation, without pressure. I know now that I can love someone without enabling their behavior. I can care for my family while still protecting myself, and that balance, while fragile, is the key to maintaining my peace. The apology he gave me wasn't perfect, but it was a step, and sometimes a step is enough to begin rebuilding. But I've learned not to place all my hope in others anymore. My peace doesn't come from their words or their actions. It comes from the choices I make for myself. If reconciliation comes, I will welcome it. If it doesn't, I will still be okay. Because I've learned that my happiness is not tied to anyone else's decisions. There are still moments when I feel the sting of betrayal. A memory will creep up, uninvited, reminding me of the nights I cried, the days I struggled, the times I felt abandoned. But instead of letting those memories crush me, I use them as reminders of how far I've come. Each painful thought is a testament to my growth, to the strength I found in the darkest of places. They remind me that even when I was broken, I didn't stay down. I rose. Forgiveness was the hardest part, not because I didn't want to forgive, but because I didn't want to forget. I thought that forgiving meant excusing, that it meant pretending nothing had happened. But I've learned that forgiveness is different. Forgiveness is about letting go of the anger that poisons you without erasing the lesson you've learned. I can forgive my brother, but I will never forget what happened. And that's okay, because remembering keeps me grounded and forgiveness keeps me free. Through this journey, I realized that I am not alone. So many people go through similar struggles with family, with friends, with those they trusted most. We don't talk about it enough, but betrayal within family can cut deeper than anything else. And yet it is through those wounds that we discover who we are. We discover our limits, our boundaries, and our strength. And in that discovery, we become unbreakable. As I share my story, I hope that someone out there hears it and realizes that they too can stand up for themselves, that they too can say no, that they too can set boundaries without guilt. It doesn't make you a bad person. It doesn't make you selfish. It makes you strong. It makes you someone who knows their worth. And in a world that constantly tries to take from you, knowing your worth is the most powerful weapon you can have. I no longer see the loan as just a debt. I see it as a turning point, a painful, costly lesson that forced me to grow in ways I never expected. It taught me resilience. It taught me courage. It taught me the importance of self-respect. And though I wish it hadn't cost me so much, I can't deny the truth. It made me stronger. And for that, in a strange way, I am grateful. There's a certain freedom that comes when you stop seeking validation from others. I no longer wait for my brother or my family to acknowledge what I did for them. I don't need their recognition. I know what I gave. I know the sacrifices I made. And I know the strength it took to walk away. That knowledge is enough. It's more than enough. In many ways, I've become a different person, stronger, wiser, but also softer, because with the pain came compassion, not just for myself, but for others who are struggling. I understand now how easy it is to lose yourself in trying to save others, and I understand how dangerous that can be. That empathy allows me to connect with others, to share my story, and to remind them that they're not alone. If there's one thing I want people to take from my story, it's this. Don't let guilt hold you hostage. Don't let family ties blind you to the truth. Don't let love become a weapon that destroys you. You are allowed to set boundaries. You are allowed to protect yourself. You are allowed to say no, and the people who truly love you will understand that. The ones who don't, they were never really on your side to begin with. I think about the future sometimes, about what kind of person I want to be years from now. And I know this. I want to be someone who chooses peace over chaos, self-respect over guilt, and truth over illusions. I want to live a life that reflects the lessons I've learned, and I want to share those lessons with anyone who needs to hear them, because I know how lonely it can feel when you think you're the only one going through it. The debt is slowly being paid off. The wounds are slowly healing. The trust may never fully return, but the strength I gained will never leave me. And as I walk forward into the next chapter of my life, I do so with the knowledge that I am capable of surviving anything. I faced betrayal, disappointment, and heartbreak, and I came out stronger. That is a victory I will carry with me forever. So if you're listening to this and you've been through something similar, know this: you are not alone. You don't have to keep sacrificing yourself for people who don't appreciate you. You don't have to carry the weight of other people's mistakes. You are allowed to choose yourself. And when you do, you will discover a strength you never knew you had. And if my story resonates with you, I ask only one thing: share it. Share it with someone who needs to hear it. Share it so that others know they're not alone. And remember to follow this journey, because together we can remind each other of one powerful truth. Sometimes the hardest no is the beginning of the most important yes, the yes to yourself.